The land that never slept. 480 years ago, long before laws learned compassion and justice learned courage, there was a land that never truly slept. It lay beyond official borders, beyond royal concern, beyond memory itself. Its name was Raktapur. Those who lived there believed the land could hear, not in the way humans hear words, but in the way wounds remember pain. The soil was dark, heavier than ordinary earth. Farmers said it resisted the plow, as if holding on to something buried deep within. Rainwater did not run clear there. It gathered slowly, tinted faintly red, like diluted blood. Old men whispered that the land had learned the taste of suffering, and it wanted more. Lives measured in hunger. Life in Raktapur was not counted in years, it was counted in meals. A good year meant eating twice a day. A bad year meant once. A cruel year, of which there were many, meant chewing leaves, roots, and silence. The villagers woke before sunrise, not because they were disciplined, but because hunger refused to let them sleep. Children learned to recognize morning, not by light, but by the hollow ache in their stomachs. Fields stretched endlessly, yet none belonged to those who worked them. Ownership was a distant concept, like mercy. The grain they harvested was weighed, taxed, and taken away under armed watch. What remained was barely enough to keep bodies alive, never enough to nourish hope. And above it all stood the mansion. The mansion at the edge of breath. Kalinath Roy's mansion did not rise proudly like other noble houses. It loomed. Built from blackened stone, its walls seemed to absorb light. Moss refused to grow upon it. Birds avoided its towers. Even insects fell silent near its gates. The mansion stood at the edge of the fields, where crops withered inexplicably and the soil hardened like dried blood. No weddings were held within sight of it. No songs were sung loudly near it. People said the mansion listened. At night, faint lights glimmered beneath its foundation, too low, too deep to be ordinary lamps. That was where the shrine lay. Kalinath Roy before the fall. Once, Kalinath Roy had been just a man, not kind, not cruel, just ambitious. Born into moderate wealth, he inherited Raktapur during a time of fragile order. In his early years, villagers remembered him riding through the fields, inspecting crops, speaking of prosperity. But ambition, when fed by fear, rots quickly. A series of droughts struck the region. Harvests failed, revenue dwindled, royal protection weakened as distant wars consumed attention. Kalinath feared losing control, and fear pushed him underground. The digging. It began as a search for water. Laborers were ordered to dig beneath the mansion courtyard. Day after day, they struck stone instead of soil. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, heavy with a smell like rust and old incense. On the seventh day, a worker screamed. The ground collapsed inward, revealing a hollow chamber. 3 men were sent down. Only one returned. He emerged shaking, hair turned white overnight, eyes unseeing. He spoke only once before dying. There is something older than God down there. The buried shrine. Kalinath Roy descended himself that night. What he found was not water. It was a shrine. Carved into stone older than the mansion, older than the village, its walls were etched with symbols no language claimed. Some appeared to move when stared at too long. At the center lay an object wrapped in decayed cloth, a charm. forged of bone, iron, and something darker still. It pulsed faintly, like a slow heartbeat. The air around it felt alive, waiting. The first offering. Roy reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the charm, pain exploded through his chest. He collapsed, screaming, visions flooding his mind, fields soaked red, mouths open in silent cries, the land drinking deeply. The pain stopped only when blood touched the shrine floor. The next morning, 3 workers were missing. The well beneath the mansion overflowed, and Kalinath Roy never fell ill again. Power learns to feed. The charm bound itself to him. He wore it hidden beneath his clothes, close to his heart. At first, its effects were subtle. Fatigue vanished, wounds healed quickly, fear lost its grip on him. Then came more. Anger strengthened him, cruelty energized him, suffering nourished him. The charm fed on pain, and Kalinath yearned to provide. The first punishments. Taxes increased. Those who failed to pay were beaten publicly, not to death, never to death. Death ended suffering too quickly. Kalinath understood something instinctively. Prolonged pain fed the charm better. Men were whipped until they fainted. Women were forced to kneel for hours in the sun. Children were made to watch. The charm warmed against his chest. The land listened. Law tests its strength. When complaints reached distant courts, a small group of armed enforcers was sent. They arrived confident. They left broken. Blades dulled upon Kalinath's skin. Fire refused to burn him. One man struck Kalinath with full force and felt his own bones shatter instead. Witnesses later claimed the air itself protected him. The enforcers fled before dawn. No one ever came again. Fear becomes a currency. From that day, fear replaced law. Kalinath no longer hid his power. He demonstrated it. He stood calmly as a knife was driven into his arm, only for the wound to close instantly. He ordered guards to strike him before villagers, showing them resistance was meaningless. Hope died quietly. The charm pulsed stronger than ever. But deep beneath the fields, something ancient stirred. The shrine was never meant to be opened, and the land had begun to remember every drop of blood spilled upon it.
When hunger became discipline. Hunger, when left long enough, stops feeling like pain. In Raktapur, hunger became discipline. Parents taught their children how to ignore it, how to sit still when the stomach screamed, how to lower their eyes when food passed them by on ox carts bound for the mansion. Children learned early that envy was dangerous. The mansion did not like to be watched. The children's duty. One morning, Kalinath Roy issued a new decree. Every household was required to send one child, aged 7 to 12, to the mansion for seasonal service. The announcement was made without emotion. Refusal meant punishment. Delay meant punishment. Questions meant punishment. No explanation was offered. The guards carried lists. Mothers learned silence. The first children taken were the weakest. Thin arms, bare feet, eyes still capable of trust. Mothers wept silently as their children were led away. Loud grief invited attention, and attention invited loss. Those who screamed watched their homes burned. So the village learned a new skill, silent despair. Inside the walls, the mansion swallowed children whole. They were made to clean floors that never seemed dirty, to carry water to rooms that stayed locked, to stand still for hours in dark corridors. But it was what lay beneath that broke them. Beneath the mansion, beyond the shrine, was a chamber carved deeper into the earth. That was where the charm fed best. Innocence as fuel. Children were not beaten immediately. They were confused first. Confusion ripened into fear. Fear ripened into despair. Kalinath understood the process well. The charm thrummed strongest when innocence collapsed, when hope shattered slowly. Some children returned after weeks. They no longer spoke. They no longer played. They stared at the ground as if listening to something below it. Others never returned at all. Their names faded quickly, spoken softly for a few weeks, then not at all. The land remembered them. Haridas and the first defiance. Haridas was a farmer with cracked hands and a spine bent from years of labor. He had lost his wife to sickness the year before. His daughter, Mira, was all that remained. When the guards came for her, Hari stood in the doorway. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply said, "No." The word felt foreign in his mouth. The guards laughed. Hari lifted a farming sickle, not as a weapon, but as a statement. "I will die first," he said. Death as a lesson. Kalinath Roy watched from the mansion balcony. He allowed Hari to speak, allowed the villagers to gather. Then he nodded. The guards struck Hari down slowly, not to kill him quickly, to teach. Each blow was deliberate, measured. Mira screamed once. The charm pulsed violently. Kalinath felt warmth spread through his chest, like satisfaction given form. Hari died looking at his daughter. Mira was taken that same hour. The lesson was complete. Rumors beneath the soil. After Hari's death, strange things began to happen. Footprints appeared in fields overnight, small ones, as if children walked beneath the soil. Water tasted sweeter near the spot where Hari fell. At night, farmers swore they heard whispers rising from the ground, too faint to understand. Old Somita, nearly blind, warned them. "The land listens," she said, "and it learns." Few dared to listen to her. When law finally came, news of Raktapur eventually reached the outer provinces, not through letters, but through absence. Tax collectors stopped returning. Trade routes went silent. Entire villages nearby emptied overnight. A small detachment of officers was sent. They arrived with banners and authority. They did not believe the stories. The night of madness. That night, screams echoed from the mansion, not screams of pain, but of terror. At dawn, the officers emerged pale, trembling. They spoke of walls that whispered their names, of shadows that showed them their worst memories, of Kalinath standing untouched while fire curved away from him. One officer gouged out his own eyes before fleeing. The rest left before sunset. Their report was never filed. Raktapur was erased from official concern. Power without witness. Kalinath understood then that he was untouchable. He stopped pretending. Public punishments became routine. Children were taken more frequently. The charm demanded more. But something had changed. The land was no longer passive. Beneath the shrine, something ancient shifted. The prison stirred, and the charm, once obedient, began to grow warm even when Kalinath slept, as if listening to another call.
The whispering shrine. Beneath the mansion, hidden from eyes that feared to see, the shrine waited. It was not merely an object of magic. It was alive, older than Kalinath Roy, older than Raktapur itself. Its walls seemed to breathe with a rhythm that no human could follow, a rhythm that measured pain as precisely as a heartbeat. The charm pulsed faintly, like a small sun buried in darkness.
Its warmth increased as suffering passed above it. Children crying, mothers wailing, men breaking under whips. Every scream, every drop of blood, every tear fed it. But the charm was not satisfied with ordinary suffering. It hungered for innocence, for hope crushed slowly, for resistance that dared to exist. And tonight, it had sensed something new. Resistance awakens. Deep in the village, a small group of men whispered in the shadows. Theirs was not defiance born of courage. They knew better. It was desperation. Hunger and grief had carved courage into their bones. "I cannot stand idle while children vanish," one of them said, clutching a small dagger meant more for ceremony than combat. Another added, "The land itself seems restless. Perhaps it is waiting for us to act." No one spoke the word magic. That was forbidden knowledge, yet they all felt it, in their throats and in their knees, a pulse beneath the fields like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The first vision. That night, the eldest among them, Suren, a farmer of 60 winters, dreamed vividly. He saw the shrine, he saw the charm glowing faintly, and he saw Kalinath Roy standing before it, smiling while children screamed. Then the earth cracked. A hand, enormous and shadowed, reached up from the soil. Suren woke screaming. His neighbors found him drenched in sweat, chanting words he did not know. The land had spoken, and the charm had listened. Kalinath's nightmares. Even Kalinath, the untouchable, began to dream. Not nightmares like ordinary men have, not images of fear alone. No, he dreamed of the land reclaiming its debt. Fields splitting, rivers of blood rising, children walking beneath the soil, staring up with empty eyes. He tried to wake, but the dreams chained him. The charm pulsed stronger when he struggled. It seemed to feed on his fear now, not just on others. For the first time in decades, Kalinath felt vulnerable. The first mistake. Kalinath attempted a ritual to strengthen the charm further. He gathered rare herbs, blood from animals, and whispered incantations he had learned decades ago. But in his arrogance, he overlooked one thing. The land itself resented control. As he began the ritual, a tremor ran through the mansion. Candles blew out, stone walls groaned, the floor beneath him shivered. The charm pulsed violently, almost violently enough to throw him off his feet. For the first time, he realized that absolute power has its limits. Children taken again. Despite growing unease, the practice continued. More children were taken. The selection process became ritualized. The charm required offerings, and it demanded obedience and innocence. Some children returned broken. Others disappeared entirely. Villagers whispered that the soil beneath the mansion had begun to stir when the children were taken. Small tremors, faint voices, shadowed hands glimpsed briefly. Even the bravest no longer dared look into the mansion courtyard. Omens of the land. Rain fell black in one distant field. A cow collapsed inexplicably near the shrine. Birds avoided the mansion entirely. Their songs stopped for the first time in centuries. The land was awake, and something beneath the shrine was learning. It was not human. It was not magic in the way men understood. It was older, patient, and hungry. And Kalinath Roy, for all his arrogance, could sense it.
The gathering storm. By the next month, whispers of rebellion spread quietly through Raktapur. Not open defiance, for that had already cost lives. No, this was subtler, small acts of courage, glimmers of hope, though none dared call them that. Some villagers left food in hidden places for the children returning from the mansion. Others left water at the shrine entrance, hoping that some ancient spirit could protect the innocent. Even small gestures were dangerous. Guards patrolled the streets constantly, eyes sharp for the slightest sign of defiance. And yet, in darkness, the people acted. The children's eyes. The children who returned began to change in strange ways. Eyes once bright with curiosity dulled to emptiness. Voices once loud with laughter became whispers. And yet sometimes, late at night, faint glimmers of awareness flashed in their eyes, silent messages, warnings, memories too sharp to speak aloud. Some parents tried to communicate with them. Some children responded in subtle gestures, finger taps, shifting eyes, small nods. These were signals the charm could not control. It fed on their innocence, but it could not yet fully consume their awareness of injustice. The first attempt. One night, a small group of men decided to act. Surin, the elder farmer, led them. Young boys and girls, old men and widows, all moved quietly with crude weapons, sticks, sickles, stones. They would try to save one child, just one. The plan was simple. Enter the courtyard, grab the child, disappear into the forest. It was brave but dangerous beyond reckoning. The courtyard of shadows. The mansion courtyard was worse than they imagined. Shadows seemed alive, stretching unnaturally across the ground. The stones themselves appeared wet, though the air was dry. The guards patrolled casually, unaware, or pretending to be, of the pulse beneath their feet. Surin signaled the group forward. They moved silently, hearts pounding. As they approached the gate leading below, a faint hum filled the air, a resonance that made their teeth ache and stomachs churn. The shrine below was awake, and it was aware of their presence. The charm responds. Inside the shrine, the charm pulsed violently. It fed on fear, but this fear was different. It was focused, sharpened by hope and determination. For the first time, the charm did not obey Kalinath fully. Its glow shifted, spreading like liquid across the chamber floor. The air smelled of iron, ozone, and something older, heavier, a warning. Kalinath, asleep above, stirred. Even he could feel it. The power he had commanded for decades was now reactive. Chaos unleashed. The rescuers made their move. A young boy darted forward, reaching for a child's hand. The charm pulsed brighter. Stones cracked, walls groaned, screams echoed, some human, some not. From the depths beneath the shrine, the first dark shapes emerged. They were neither fully solid nor entirely shadow, moving fluidly yet deliberately toward the intruders. Panic seized the group. Some froze, some ran, others were swallowed by shadows before they could cry out. It was the first proof that the shrine would not be trifled with. Kalinath's awareness. Above, Kalinath awoke suddenly. A cold shiver ran down his spine. His chest, where the charm rested, burned. He rose and approached the balcony. The courtyard was in chaos. Shadows stretched unnaturally, shapes twisting unnervingly. For the first time, he felt fear. Not physical fear, not a fleeting chill, but existential fear. The charm had grown beyond his full control. Something ancient beneath the earth had awakened, and it had taken notice of those daring to defy him. Aftermath. By dawn, the courtyard was empty. The rescuers who survived fled silently into the forest, never daring to speak of the shapes they had seen. The charm pulsed calmly once more, but it remembered. Kalinath Roy, untouchable for decades, realized the balance had shifted. For the first time in his life, he was no longer fully in charge. The land, The shrine, the charm, they were all alive in ways he had never anticipated, and Raktapur had begun to fight back, silently, slowly.
The curse deepens. The shrine beneath the mansion pulsed with hunger. It was no longer content with merely feeding on fear or obedience. It wanted more profound offerings, innocence stripped of hope, courage crushed but still aware, and defiance witnessed but unanswered. Every child taken was measured carefully, not just physically, but spiritually. The charm counted every heartbeat, every quiver of fear, every fleeting moment of hope, and stored it like precious currency. Kalinath Roy, once confident that he controlled this power, began to notice something troubling. The charm no longer obeyed his gestures perfectly. It reacted, it anticipated, and it warned him. Children in the shadows. The children who had survived the courtyard chaos returned more broken than before. Their eyes sometimes flickered, showing glimpses of the horrors they had seen. Some muttered words in whispers no adult could understand, or words older than the language of men. Some refused to eat, some refused to sleep. The charm seemed to linger in their minds, like a phantom presence whispering obedience, but it also showed them glimpses of the earth beneath the mansion, of the shapes and shadows that had claimed their would-be rescuers. Fear and knowledge mingled, and the charm fed on both. Kalinath's desperation. Kalinath tried new rituals. He burned incense, called upon forgotten spirits, poured rare oils over the charm. He muttered incantations older than the village itself, but nothing returned the charm to full obedience. He realized the shrine had a will beyond him. For decades he had believed he ruled Raktapur. Now he understood that the charm and the shrine were partners, not servants, and partners do not always obey. The first warning. One night, lightning struck the mansion as if the sky itself had noticed the imbalance. The mansion shivered, windows rattled, shadows moved independently of the flickering candlelight. Kalinath stood frozen. The charm pulsed violently beneath his chest. The shrine beneath the mansion trembled faintly. It was not a threat, it was a message. The land itself, through the shrine, had begun to communicate its displeasure. Even Kalinath Roy, untouchable tyrant, felt true fear for the first time. The villagers' quiet acts. While the mansion burned in chaos, unseen by the world, the villagers acted silently. They began hiding food, teaching children secret paths, whispering coded warnings. These acts seemed trivial, but they were impossible to hide from the shrine. The charm sensed them. It pulsed, it whispered, it tested boundaries, and it prepared for something larger. First signs of change. By the following week, small tremors were noticed in the mansion's foundation. The guards who entered certain rooms felt an unnatural heaviness pressing against them. Dogs barked and fled from courtyards they had previously ignored. Kalinath Roy became increasingly paranoid. Even the children's subtle gestures of defiance began to feel like mockery of his authority. The charm, he realized, was no longer just his tool. The land itself had begun to fight back quietly. Shadows watching. In the dead of night, the mansion's corridors seemed alive.
Shadows elongated, detached from their sources, and lingered near Kalinath. Sometimes, he swore, the shadow shapes watched him from the walls themselves. The charm pulsed constantly now, almost impatiently. Its warmth was no longer comforting, it was demanding. It had tasted fear, desperation, and courage, and it wanted more. And for the first time, Kalinath Roy felt the fragility of power.
The shrine awakens fully. The charm had been patient for decades. It had consumed fear, tears, innocence, and defiance in measured doses. But now, with small acts of rebellion stirring in the village and the partially aware children returning from the mansion, the shrine decided to awaken fully. The chamber beneath the mansion trembled violently. Stone walls cracked, releasing faint glimmers of red light. The air was thick with a metallic tang, like blood mixed with iron filings. Shapes emerged from the shadows. They were neither human nor entirely spirit, yet their presence demanded attention. Kalinath Roy felt it immediately. The first confrontation. Above, he stood in the mansion hall, looking down at the courtyard. "Impossible," he whispered. He clenched his fists. The charm pulsed violently against his chest. Below, the shadows of the shrine moved with purpose. They reached out, testing the limits of the mansion's foundation. The first touch of one shadow against a guard caused him to collapse, screaming incoherently. Blood, though no visible wound existed, poured from his eyes and mouth. Kalinath's face turned pale. The charm hissed, as if scolding him. Children caught in between. The children in the mansion noticed the difference immediately. The shadows moved near them, but instead of harming, they watched. Their presence seemed protective, almost sentient, as if the shrine was teaching the children how to survive. One child reached for another, and for the first time in months, smiled briefly. Kalinath's stomach tightened. The charm pulsed erratically. The balance of power, long in his favor, shook. Kalinath's first defeat. For decades he had ruled with impunity. Fear was his ally. The charm was his servant. But the shrine had grown beyond obedience. It no longer sought his control. It sought its own justice. Kalinath attempted to order the shadows back into dormancy. He struck the charm violently. He chanted loudly, forcefully, invoking every ritual he had memorized. Nothing worked. The shadows advanced. The charm pulsed uncontrollably. For the first time, Kalinath Roy felt powerless. The land retaliates. Outside the mansion, the village felt subtle tremors. Fences split, wells overflowed with rusty water, and the soil shifted unnaturally. The land itself had begun to take revenge. Even the air was thick with ancient power, vibrating through the streets, into homes, into hearts.